In the storyline of every video game, there are moments that we, as players, cannot accept. Well, the choices made by the protagonists are sometimes completely unclear to us. Of course, being in the shoes of the main character who made a certain decision, perhaps we would have done quite the same. After all, it is known that being an observer of a given situation is much easier to assess it and make the right decision. As it turns out, the Grand Theft Auto series is full of moments when the main characters make terrible choices. That's what we're going to talk about in today's video. Of course, these are not the only situations in which the protagonists did not choose the right option. So if you want to take part in the discussion after watching the video, please consider writing a comment with other situations adequate to the topic we're discussing today. Welcome to the Gaming Investigators channel and enjoy the episode. The first one will be the choice made by Michael, which actually started a whole set of events, and you can even say that it created the plot of GTA 5. We're talking about the situation from the marriage counseling mission, where Michael, under the influence of impulse, unknowingly got into serious trouble. One day, Michael, returning home, witnessed, to put it mildly, a very unpleasant situation for him. Seeing the two tennis rackets at the door, Michael quickly guessed that something was clearly wrong. And unfortunately, he was not wrong, because as it turned out, a moment later, his wife Amanda decided to cheat on her husband with a tennis coach. The whole situation escalated quite rapidly. Kyle Chavez narrowly escaped with his life after jumping out of the window of the DeSanta family's home, fleeing an enraged Michael. Michael did not give up and decided to chase the tennis coach to break all his bones. In the end, Kyle hid in a villa that belonged to the mistress of Martin Madrazo, the head of a powerful drug cartel. Unfortunately, Michael didn't think in his emotions that it would be hard for a tennis coach to own such a villa and that, thus, it doesn't really belong to him, but only became a temporary place of retreat for him. Michael, in an act of revenge, decides to deal not only with Kyle, but also with the entire property.
Let's see how he liked that. Whoa, man!
The removal of the mansion from the hills of Vinewood is extremely spectacular. So the news spread very quickly, and suddenly Michael and Franklin are chased by Madrazo's people. The main characters luckily manage to avoid the attackers, but in the end, Madrazo personally drives up to Michael's house to make it clear to him that he won't get away with it. To avoid a greater conflict, Michael DeSanta is required to pay all costs associated with the destroyed mansion. The costs are huge and oscillate around $2.5 million. As you can see, the butterfly effect worked instantly here. But the question is, could it have been avoided? Definitely. Michael, being one of the more intelligent characters, may have just thought of a way to get to Kyle Chavez. The protagonist had him at a dead end, so it was enough to think for a second, and surely a better solution could be found than to destroy the entire house, which could hardly belong to Amanda's lover. Instead, not only did Michael not retaliate one bit against Kyle, but he also led to his financial disaster. Moving on, the next example where a game character makes a bad decision is the murder of Mikhail Faustin by Niko Bellic in GTA 4. Overall, Faustin's relationship with Bellic was quite unusual. At first, the main character of GTA 4 was facing a dead-end situation. The man, locked in the basement with his cousin Roman, may have feared that these might be his last moments. However, Vlad, whom Niko killed, was a total idiot for Faustin, and the cruel boss of the Russian mafia saw in Niko a person who could be useful to him in settling his affairs.
So, Niko Bellic, you think it's okay to kill my employees?
If he is an asshole, yes.
Do it! I agree.
In the following days, the cooperation between the men was extremely successful. Unfortunately, over time, the main character of GTA 4 began to see many controversial flaws in his employer. Both the way Faustin treated his family and his people made the atmosphere tense all the time, and Niko was less and less willing to take on subsequent orders.
Привет, Лена.
Привет, Ма.
What is that? I tell you one thing and you ignore me! You stupid bitch! Nico Bellic, baby.
Nico's confusion was quickly noticed by Dmitry Raskolov, and he decided to use this opportunity to get rid of his friend with the help of the Serb.
You and Mikhail, you have so much history.
Sure.
Well, I killed the boy, so they want me too.
No. I told them you were a hired gun. And they said as long as you were the one to kill him, you'd be spared.
And again, at this point, we ask ourselves the same questions as before. Did it have to be like this? Our answer is not really. You have to take into account that Nico Bellic has always been relatively loyal so far. True, the man had murdered Vlad, but that was the exception that proved the rules, and we're sure most would agree. It was fully justified. Faustin, on the other hand, was what he was, but he didn't give Nikolai any good reason for Nico to turn against him. After the basement incident, Faustin did give Nico heavy tasks, but at the same time, he gave what the main character wanted very much from the very beginning of his arrival in Liberty City, which, of course, is money. Even though Faustin was a bad person, at one point he fully trusted Nikolai. There was no situation where Faustin tried to betray the protagonist.
You. Prove you're loyal. Go and kill the guy.
Don't question my loyalty.
Then don't question my orders.
Despite this, Nico agreed to Dmitry's request, which turned cruelly against him in the future. Not only was Dmitry constantly looking for a way to make the main character's life miserable, but also, following the canonical ending of the game, Nico lost the woman he loved. Yes, Pegorino murdered Kate McCreary, but the reason for what happened is well known to us, and we know that things would certainly have turned out differently if Dmitry could bite the dust earlier. In the meantime, we move on to another situation, which this time concerns GTA San Andreas. Specifically, it's about CJ's completely irrational behavior in the context of the missions for Big Smoke. As you know, at the beginning of the game, Carl Johnson tries to help his Grove Street families, and all this, among other things, is done to show that CJ still has it, and is not at all the coward that some consider him to be. For this purpose, the man meets with his brother Sweet, a friend who lives next door, Ryder, and with Big Smoke. When we go through missions for Big Smoke as inexperienced players, we usually don't see anything suspicious there. In addition, some missions are very enjoyable for us, or on the contrary, they're like a pain in the ass that needs to be overcome to push the story forward. Anyway, looking more closely at the threads that run through the quests for Big Smoke, we're sure many of you had the impression that these missions didn't really help our gang. We only help Big Smoke, but we don't get any of it, not even money. And when we add to this the leftovers from the beta version of the missions we're talking about now, it turns out that it's even worse than we thought. Suddenly, we find out that Big Smoke wanted to get a package of drugs for 10 penny, or we hear more of his poetic metaphors, which, contrary to appearances, mean a lot. And it's not until the mission, The Green Saber, when Big Smoke's betrayal comes to light, that we begin to understand just how blinded CJ was at the time. Going even further, some of us may be in disbelief that there have been so many signs of Big Smoke's betrayal before, and CJ hasn't seen it anyway.
Smoke, tell me why you moved out the Grove.
Man, got some money from my aunt. I mean, it's a nice place and all, but the Grove is in my heart, baby. It's where my dogs is at.
Yeah, okay, homie.
And here we come to the main point of the topic. In our opinion, CJ's incompetence in Big Smoke's thread exceeded our wildest expectations. The man has repeatedly witnessed situations that clearly indicated that something was wrong with Big Smoke. Despite this, CJ underestimated these signals and did not care about them. And even if something did not suit him, he went easy and explained it all to himself that Big Smoke is like that. If CJ had decided to tell Sweet about everything, the whole thing could have ended much faster, and there wouldn't have been many unpleasant moments. Anyway, we talk a lot about this in the episode that is now being displayed to you in the tab. Also, in short, CJ screwed up all the way, and while the undeniable fact is that in the end, it worked out for him, like in the case of almost every protagonist in the GTA series, we'll say it again. CJ could have prevented many negative consequences, where the lives of members of the Johnson family were at stake, but also the functioning of the entire Grove Street families. At the very end, we will present one more thread that definitely could have gone in a much better way. We're talking about purchasing diamonds by Tony Prince and Luis Lopez in GTA The Ballad of Gay Tony. In general, looking at this thread from the side, one could get the impression that it was a great decision. After all, the men secretly bought diamonds worth a lot of money, which could make it much easier for them to develop a club business in Liberty City, especially since at some point, this business began to fail badly and Tony could use some serious cash for a stronger restart. However, it's worth looking at this topic from a much larger perspective. Regardless of whether we look at how things with diamonds turned out in GTA 4 or the DLCs, each of us will unanimously answer that they were not worth the effort. Not only did the precious stones take the lives of many people, but no one really had any use for them. So let's see how many worse things happened after Tony and Luis Lopez bought those cursed diamonds. First, shortly after the diamonds were purchased, the Lost Bikers showed up and took down Tony Prince's boyfriend. This caused considerable depression in the man, which was later washed down with a solid amount of intoxicating liquors. Then, in turn, comes the issue of Gracie Ancelotti. The men's friend and daughter of the Ancelotti crime family is kidnapped and brutally beaten. This whole mess, as we remember, is also due to the diamonds that were in Tony and Luis's possession. This time, the men get rid of the diamonds once and for all, but that still doesn't end their worries. Meanwhile, Luis Lopez befriends Ray Bulgarin, the real owner of the diamonds. And although at first it looks as if Ray Bulgarin actually wants to invest in the Masonette 9 Club, these are only appearances to buy into Tony Prince's favor and create a false sense of security. Ray Bulgarin figured out pretty quickly that Luis Lopez must be a pretty effective assassin to have survived what happened at the docks. So the man decides to use Lopez a bit for his purposes to finish a few things. What happens in the end? Well, Bulgarin betrays Luis Lopez, and later, on his initiative, a bloody mess takes place in the Masonette Club. In fact, by a huge miracle, Tony and Luis manage to survive to a happy end. And here it must be clear, Tony and Luis made a serious mistake buying diamonds from the cook from the platypus ship. The men didn't do their research. They bought diamonds from a person who was no serious player in the criminal underworld. The men did not think about how such a person obtained such valuable treasures and on whose toes he stepped on to get them. Once again, thoughtlessness led the main characters almost to a great disaster. To sum up today's episode, there are plenty of moments in the GTA games where the game's protagonist behaved very irresponsibly. None of the characters were completely aware of the bad consequences that could take place, which could end tragically. Recklessness on the part of the main characters, as well as problems with a good assessment of the situation, and poor calculation led to the fact that sometimes the main characters made themselves, colloquially speaking, strongly uphill. In the meantime, thanks for watching, take care, and see you soon.